Great. Well, thank you all for having me here today. It's great to follow on these other examples and to, I think we'll see a lot of connections between them. So Relief International, just to put us in a bit of context, we've been around about 25 years, started in Iran. After some earthquakes there, we're still active in Iran. And about 17 other countries around the world. I would say the bulk of our portfolio, which is about $70 million of programming every year, is really in fragile states and or vulnerable communities in states that are a little more stable. So I'm going to cover two things today. The bulk will be about our work with the National Solidarity Program in Afghanistan, and then I want to just present a somewhat different angle on some of these issues. So the National Solidarity Program was started in 2003. That's when we became involved with it. It is really an effort focused squarely on governance development. So this is not sort of trying to do something else and building governance in at the same time. It is really about building local governance capacity. The two goals were empower local government and to improve social cohesion. You see here two pictures, a group of men who are busy counting ballots, but were involved in consultation, and also a group of women. There were very specific strategies that were designed for this program. And it was rolled out in 5 phases. So the first was that they identified some facilitating partners. Relief International was one of those. We covered 3 provinces in Afghanistan, but altogether over time there have been over a dozen different facilitating partners. Then after a period of mobilization and introducing the idea at the community level, there were elections to decide who was going to be part of the community development councils. These councils had some rules, like they had to have equal representation of women, which would not necessarily have been the case if one had just left it open to local customs. The CDCs then held local consultations, and out of those consultations came community development plans. In those plans, there were some independent projects, things that they could prioritize and do themselves that didn't require outside support, and then also some sponsored projects, things they wanted to do but would require some additional money. There was a centralized block grant system, similar to some other venues that we've heard about, and those block grants were then awarded for some of those proposals. They were then, the implementation of those were monitored at the local level, and then there was an assessment on the technological quality of the implementation and some documentation of lessons learned. The kinds of projects varied enormously. They might have been to build a school because there wasn't one close enough for the children to participate in. It might have been strengthening a health clinic. It might have been, or they included, building irrigation systems or water management systems to prevent flooding. In some cases, they were building roads. Some of Afghanistan is hugely mountainous, and road access can make all the difference. We heard before, if it's not within 6 miles, right, then it may as well not exist. So strengthening roads so people have access to goods and services, to markets, could be really important. And it could be a water tap. It really just depended on what was needed locally. Here you see an example of a community group, men and women together, working on identifying their projects that they wanted in their own community. This is a quote of one of the beneficiaries, one of the participants. Before NSP covered our area, there were always disputes and conflicts among the villagers, which usually led to instability and insecurity in the area. Now we can solve our problems and disputes through the CDC in a consultative manner, and our children have access to school to continue their studies with great enthusiasm in a peaceful environment and without any threat. Now, if you consider where Afghanistan was coming from and what all it's been going through, this is an enormous accomplishment. I'm well aware that multiple anecdotes do not make for data, but I just thought this was such a strong representation of the kind of impact that this program could have. Over time, between 2003 and 2012, and this projects like NSP, which are fantastic, and then have other kinds of projects with other outcomes that get measured. How do we build that in to build the participation into other projects? And the community-led development is certainly one of those approaches. What we're doing at Relief International is trying to make the how of what we do as important as the what, which I think is a is a more complicated way of saying community-led development, but there are 4 pieces for us. One is that strong local participation. The other is integrating sector work, because people's lives are a whole. They aren't just students and then just, sick people. It all fits together. A third, and I'll start on the bottom right there, is partnerships, because we're very strong in a few sectors, but not everything. So we need to know how to partner well at the local level with government and with other NGOs, both international and local. And finally, civic skills. So I spent 10 years at a university where we invested enormous resources in helping American young people develop civic skills. So think about that. Young people who grow up in a country that's the longest running democracy that we have, and yet we had to invest enormous time and resources in helping them become effective citizens. So the question is, what is the hope for people to become effective, engaged in a democracy if they've grown up in an authoritarian environment of whatever stripe, where the basic skills for survival are followership, obedience, and loyalty? We figure that we can actually, in any program that we're running, we can build in those skills of transparency, accountability, and deliberation as the sort of foundational skills. They're foundational in the United States, they're foundational in any developed democracy, and they're foundational in any aspiring democracy, and to my mind, are part of that sort of human aspiration for voice. So we think that this is important because good governance is critical to sustainability. We've all seen projects that come and go because when you leave town, there's no capacity to really hold people accountable. And because good governance requires, and I love the economic language here, both a supply of good governance, that you've got institutions and courts and rule of law and all that, but also the demand for good governance, that people expect those people around them to be held to the same standard. So I just want to introduce that question of the demand side of good governance and how we can build that into our work. Thank you.